the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
This is the CFL This Week. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil, finally off the IR, and I'm so happy, really. We're down to the 4 final teams here in the Canadian Football League playoffs. We're all looking towards that Grey Cup, and lots to discuss after an exciting weekend of semifinal football. Let's bring in our co-host, and he is operating from TSN 1200 in the nation's capital, AJ Jakubec. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, great to be with you, Bubba.
960 Calgary, the big show. Will Nault finally back with us. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you got to say about what was going on last night.
Why? What happened? I don't know what you're talking about. Thanks for having me out, guys.
Hey, it's great to have you. Hey, guys, let's get right to it. Lots of things to talk about. If the old saying, the defense wins championship, is true, did the Tiger Cats' performance versus the Alouettes change the opinions of some of Hamilton's naysayers? AJ, we'll start with you.
You know, when I saw this question, I actually was wondering, I didn't realize they had naysayers. That kind of surprised me a little bit when I saw that. So I felt Hamilton had the best defense in the East going into the playoffs, and nothing changed after watching them against Montreal, after watching them shut down the running game of William Stanback, which really no other team in the CFL has been able to do this year. The pressure that they got on Trevor Harris, which led to some of the turnovers as well. So I've been a fan of Hamilton's defense all year long. I think they've got a lot of veterans that the guys like Jagaret Davis and Dylan Wynn and Ted Laurent and obviously Simone Lawrence, Jamal Roll. You can go on and on and on. This is a group that is really plays well schematically. They've got the athletes to do it, and they've gone out and they execute at the most important times. So I think second best defense in the league, and not surprised what they did to Montreal yesterday.
Yeah, you mentioned the ability to shut down Stanback, and that to me has been certainly the most impressive from Hamilton this season. And you go back to the regular season, guys, they were able to shut him down in those meetings as well. And no one was able to do that. And, deservedly so. He was the East nominee for MOP. But, I think if there were naysayers, that defense has given them something to think about. And, Bubba, last time I was on this program, the theme was Hamilton's quarterback play. And I still think that is probably one of the biggest questions going into the Final Four and perhaps the Grey Cup matchup. Not to say Masoli was bad yesterday, but when you look at it, that defense did carry him. And, I give him a lot of credit because the time of possession was, certainly way in Montreal's favor early on. You get that strip sack of Harris, and all of a sudden that thing changed in that second quarter. So 5 turnovers in total. I was super impressed with Hamilton's defense, and I think they've given Dinwiddie and company in Toronto something to think about. And if there were naysayers, I think that they have been silenced at least for another 7 days.
I think the naysayers, AJ, are talking probably, again, because the defense was so dominant yesterday on Sunday, is the fact that Masoli, a couple of, maybe it might have been 2 or 3 2-and-outs right off the top of the game. To be honest, being there, the crowd was getting a little restless as well.
Yeah, and that's going to be the thing to watch going forward is, this offense. And especially going into the game against Toronto, where I thought, they laid an egg the last time when first place was on the line against the Argonauts. I can't imagine that they'll do the same this week. I do like the Ticats to win, but they certainly have a lot to prove. And I think Jeremiah Masoli has a lot to prove as well. There's still people around the league that aren't really convinced that he's going to be back in Hamilton next year. So I find it hard to believe if all of a sudden Hamilton gets to the Grey Cup that they're going to move on from their starting quarterback, but we'll wait and see. But I do think there's a lot to prove for this group, especially with the pressure of potentially playing in a Grey Cup that is in Hamilton.
You know what, guys? I mean, on the flip side of that here, and I would have never really asked this question unless I was in the media booth for yesterday's game, because, listening to some of the French media, I understand French. And so I got to ask you this. I'll start with you, Will, on this. With Danny Machocha running the program, you think Kahri Jones has the support to return as the head coach there? Because it seems like there might be a bit of a schism there, or maybe Machocha has his guy. Has Kahri done enough to return next year? Got one more year left in his contract.
I think if anything, he's made it a conversation. But the one thing you brought up there is the first thing that jumped to my mind when I saw this topic, and it stretches to every sport, not just football. But when you bring in a GM who hasn't hired that coach, sometimes they might not have that full support. Sometimes they might think differently about that guy. And obviously he inherited Kahri Jones when he took that job, and albeit he took it before a 2020 year that didn't actually happen because of the pandemic, and he's only been there. They've only worked together for the one season where there's actually been football played. But I think overall, if it were me, especially knowing there's 1 year left on the deal, I think Kahri Jones has done enough to keep that job. And, let's see what we can do with that final year of the deal. He's obviously lost the 2 playoff games he's coached, but I look at that and he wasn't playing quarterback yesterday. I didn't think Trevor Harris was all that great. And, if Vernon Adams is healthy, I think they might have a chance to win that football game, especially with how they started out the game. And I mentioned the time of possession. They were dominant early. They were. And Trevor Harris, gets stripped the sack, and that field possession was dramatically turned. Hamilton punches it in, and before you could blink, it was 20-3, and Hamilton, all of a sudden took that thing right over. So I have a hard time putting that on Kahri, but a long way of answering your question. I do think that he's deserved another chance, but I also understand the conversation because AJ, that's not his guy, and he inherited Kahri Jones. So I understand why that's a conversation.
Yeah, when I saw that yesterday, saw some of those rumblings from Montreal that maybe they would make a change. It really surprised me because I think he's done a heck of a job going back to 2019. That was a team that was going nowhere for years, and all of a sudden Kahri, in difficult circumstances, right? I mean, it's not like he took over in training, before training camp. He took over like barely right before the season started in 2019 and led them to a pretty solid season and a solid record. And now this year, they're right in the mix to win the East until the end with a situation where their quarterback goes down, one of the best quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League for my money, in Vernon Adams Jr., and he goes down basically at the midway point of the season. He played, 8 of the 14 games? I'll be honest, I vote for the awards. I'll tell you right now that when it comes to Eastern All-Star, I voted Vernon Adams Jr. at the quarterback position over all the other Eastern quarterbacks. I voted him ahead of McLeod Bethel Thompson. So I know he'd only played 8 games. I thought he was the best quarterback. Simple as that. Sometimes I think we punish guys for getting hurt, and Vernon Adams Jr. shouldn't have been punished for getting hurt. And to follow that up, Kahri Jones shouldn't be punished, whether he was hired by Danny Machocha or not. He should not be punished, just basically for losing a starting quarterback just past the midway point of the season. Danny Machocha, he's got a lot to prove as well. If this is coming from Danny Machocha, he's got a lot to prove. He was a pretty good head coach. He was I was in Edmonton. I'm from Edmonton. I was in Edmonton when he was there as GM. He was very average. So if he wants to continue on with being very average, get rid of the head coach. Bring in your own guy. But if he wants to maybe show what he can do as a general manager, maybe stick to the head coach and go out and bring him a few more good players.
It kind of does look like he's on a track to success. This team is competitive, and you know what? Maybe if not for a week 18, but a week 14 or 16 loss against Ottawa, things might have been different. They might have been hosting that East semifinal game.
Yeah, and the other thing, the thing I'll add to that is, you know who's hoping Kahri Jones gets let go is a team like Edmonton, right? Team that's looking for a head coach. If you're out there with, and I again, they've got a lot of other problems. They got to hire a president and general manager and the works, but I bet they've got their fingers crossed that they're going to make this move right now, because to me, if he gets let go, he should be picked up in a New York minute by a team that's looking, and I think he'd be a pretty good fit in Edmonton.
All right, guys, let's go to the other game. This West Final, full of errors, full of mistakes, interceptions, missed field goals by quality players. But yet it turned into just a thriller of a game, ended up going in overtime. Did the best team win the West Final, Mr. Will Nault from Calgary?
It's funny that you put in from Calgary, and it maybe some people will laugh at my answer. I think you look at, we talk all the time, especially in football, about momentum and playing the best football at the right time of the season. I think Calgary came in and was playing some of the best football across the league. And when you win 6 of your final 7 games, and you look at the way they started the year, everyone had them down and out. They were going to miss the playoffs for the first time in 15 years. Instead, they punched their ticket and go to the playoffs for a 16th straight year. And that defense did everything they could to help them win that game yesterday. I think the Stampeders are the better team, but I think they lost that football game, and they shot themselves in the foot at very key times. And, you talk about very important players with miscues. When's the last time Paredes missed 3 kicks in a game? I don't even remember the last time he did that. He missed 4 all season. It was a crazy game, and it's funny because, it was poor execution everywhere. It was an ugly football game. But the reason why everybody loved it, because that right there was the CFL. The way that game finished, that is what people love about the Canadian Football League. And so it was an entertaining game. It was a messy game. I think the better team lost, but I think they lost it themselves. And not to say the Riders took it from them, because I don't think they did. I think Calgary lost that football game. I think they were the better team coming in. You look at those 3 matchups they played all within a month. I know Calgary lost one of those 3, but they probably could have won all 3 of those games. And so, I think they were the better team, but they lost the game. And I think they were the ones who surrendered it. I don't think the Riders took it from them. And it's too bad, because they certainly, I think deserved a better fate.
I don't know if either team deserved to win. When you turn the ball over 4 times, and both teams did, I don't know if either team really deserved to win. But in the end, the forgotten phase, right? Special teams. And, the Calgary special teams, they muffed a punt. Paredes missed 3 field goals, which never happens. That's basically what he misses over the course of a season. You look at the kick return for a touchdown. You look at the onside kick to start the second half. They won the special teams battle in a big way, and that turned that football game. So, I don't think either team stands a chance in Winnipeg, or would have stand. Like, when you play like that, and now you're going to play probably the best team that I've seen in the Canadian Football League over the course of the last decade. With all due respect to some of those good Stampeder teams, this Winnipeg team, the way they looked this season, they're a cut above everybody. And if Saskatchewan plays anywhere near that, like if they limit their turnovers to 2, they're still going to get pummeled. You just can't make mistakes against a quality team like Winnipeg. But in the end, it was wildly entertaining. It wasn't the best played game that I've ever seen in CFL history with the 8 turnovers, but it was wildly entertaining right to the last kick.
And let's not forget, guys, there probably could have been 2 returns for touchdowns. I think that was a bad call on the block on Paredes. And I think that Calgary got lucky there in the first quarter when he missed his first one. I think that the Riders returned that clean. And so, I'm with AJ. I think the special teams battle was the one that swung it, and give the Riders credit for what they did in that department, which is usually the forgotten of the 3.
Will, how much did the Sean Lemon situation hurt the Stampeders?
I think greatly. I think him and Mike Rose, what they've done all year on that defensive line was huge for Calgary, and it just goes back to kind of my first answer. I think they shot themselves in the foot way too much in that game, and that can't happen. I don't care if it's playoffs or regular season. You can't make a bonehead play like that, and Lemon did it and hurt his team as a result. They weren't able to, have the typical D-line rotation that they've had most of the season. And, I think as a result, some of those guys got tired, especially as you went into overtime. But, yeah, when you look at, what Lemon and Rose did all year, you take one of those two away, and it makes the job easier for the Riders. And not to say they took advantage of it, because I think they could have. But, it was kind of lost for words as to what that was. It was a dumb play. And the ejection was fully deserved for me.
Well, I mean, we're hearing that it was Duke Williams that spit in the face of Lemon, and Lemon punched him in the head, and that got the ejection. As always, it's the second guy that does something, and I'm not saying Duke Williams is guilty of anything, but as the referee, AJ, you're going to call whatever you see, and the punch to the head certainly is going to get you an ejection. Yeah,
you've got in football, sometimes it's about one or two plays, and that's a big play right there. It's a big play not just because of the loss of Sean Lemon in the second half and overtime, but again, it probably led to the decision to kick the onside kick attempt to start the third quarter, and that was successful and led to a touchdown. I don't think they do that if they're back 25 yards from the penalties. So it was definitely one of those TSN type turning points that you'll always look back on.
All right, guys. I'm hearing some rumblings from a lot of different people, and you know what? And I'm not quite sure how I feel about this. I mean, the game was exciting from the beginning to the end. The overtime format, this is what they do in the regular season, playing these two mini halves, and you score, I score. Is that the way to solve a game in the postseason, or should they play a 10-minute quarter or sudden death? Do you like the format that is in place right now in the Canadian Football League, guys?
I'll start. I watched a lot of football this weekend. I'm an Auburn fan when it comes to college football from the Bo Jackson days, and watching that Auburn-Alabama game, and they changed the format this year of overtime in the U.S. and college football, and I don't like that format at all. So could you make the CFL playoff format, overtime format better? You could. In a perfect world, maybe teams would start at midfield and have the mini games there, so that you don't have a situation where you don't get a yard and then you kick a field goal and you can still win the game. That kind of leaves a bit of a stale taste in my mouth. But with football, I mean, there's really no perfect format, right? I don't like the format in the NFL so much because, if you win the coin toss, it's better now that you have to at least score a touchdown after the coin toss in the first drive to end the game. But, you can still not even get the ball and just because of the toss lose the game, right? So I feel like it's probably the best of kind of some not great options. Can you move it back to the 55? You could, but maybe that extends the game and, player safety, and, you don't want games going on forever. So in the end, I think the last thing I want is the mini game or sudden death or something like that. I think it's probably the best of a lot of just average formats, because football of all the different sports doesn't really lend itself to a great overtime format.
It's exactly what I was going to say. I think in a sport like football, it's so hard to have an overtime format that everyone's going to love. It's a challenging, landscape. I think AJ's bang on. That's kind of what I was going to talk about in terms of, you look at the way that West semifinal ended in Regina yesterday. Rene Paredes misses that kick, so the Riders come out, run the ball twice, and then kick the field goal. So they were as soon as Paredes missed that, you knew the game was over. Yeah. I think maybe the 55 is too long, because then you do run into a situation where maybe each team possesses the ball 5 or 6 times because nobody can kick a field goal or get a first down. Maybe if you even move it back to the 40 or the 45, make that field goal a little bit more challenging than essentially a little bit longer than an extra point. So that's kind of what I would look at. It's funny because Calgary's lost some pretty notable overtime games in the playoffs in recent memories. Look at the Grey Cup against Ottawa and then yesterday against Saskatchewan. So I'm sure you talk to a lot of Stampeder fans. They'd love to change the format, but I just think there's no perfect science in football, and you could play a 10-minute overtime period, but you might not still have a winner. So it's not a perfect sport for sudden death overtime. I do like the NFL format probably the best because I think that if you lose the coin toss but give up a touchdown on the first drive, well, you probably deserve to lose anyways. That's on your defense to make a stop. So, I think when they, kick a field goal to end the game, that was a little bit hard to swallow for the losing team because you didn't get a chance to have the ball back. But I don't mind the CFL overtime. I just think that starting at the 35-yard line is essentially an automatic field goal for a lot of these kickers. And, yeah, you're going to get the rare miss, but more often than not
it's almost an extra point nowadays.
Exactly. So more often than not, that's going to be a kick that you're going to see made. And so that's the one thing I would change. Is probably move it back even 5 yards. Start at the 40, make that a 47-yard field goal. That's a little bit tougher. So there's no perfect science, though.
Let's stick with the teams that are, I guess, cleaning out their lockers today. I'm going to name 2 individuals here that were, I would believe, and maybe you guys could correct me or not, I kind of feel like their careers are in the tipping point. Who has a better chance of returning to their clubs that they're with right now? Levi Mitchell in Calgary or Trevor Harris in Montreal, AJ?
Well, I think Levi Mitchell, but I don't know. I mean, obviously he was talking yesterday, post-game about people don't know what's going on, and that's true because I was asking the question, what is going on with Levi Mitchell? This doesn't look like the same quarterback, and I know he dealt with injury all year, but the zip seemed to be off some of the balls that he was throwing when I was watching him yesterday and just late in the season as well. So that's the burning question. This is a guy that's been, one of the best players in the league. And when I say one of the best, top 2 or 3, one of the best, really for 7 years. And now when you watch him play, he just looks like an average quarterback. And I'm sure there's a reason for it. I'm not writing Levi Mitchell off by any standpoint. I'm curious to see what Calgary does. I mean, I would think they're going to come back with Bull, but Jake Maier looked pretty good, when we saw him in a short sample size. Do they let another young quarterback get away? I don't think there's any chance Trevor Harris is back in Montreal with a big signing bonus. And the fact that you still have Vernon Adams Jr., I mean, he's their guy. So I think Trevor Harris hits the free agent market. And, I guess the question is the team that probably needs a quarterback more than any is the Ottawa Redblacks. And that's the team he decided to leave in 2018. Was there bad blood? I wouldn't say there was bad blood, but I think
Marcel didn't want to pay him.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure how he'd be received here in both the locker room and also in the community. I like Trevor, but I don't know. I think from an Ottawa perspective, in a perfect world, they're probably looking somewhere else, whether it's one of the Hamilton quarterbacks that might come free, a Masoli or an Evans, whoever they decide to kind of – I can't imagine they'll keep both again. Maybe they go for, whoever Calgary doesn't keep. And I would think they would keep Bo. I mean, I would think if Bo is on the market that's a no-brainer for Ottawa that they would bring him in. But, I think from my standpoint, the guy who's got no chance of going back to his current club with the 2 is Trevor Harris in Montreal.
Yeah, obviously the easy answer is Levi Mitchell. I think there's a very good chance he does stay in Calgary, but for the first time probably all in his entire career, that's a legitimate conversation. And I know that people don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, even here in Calgary, nobody knows what's going on with Bo. Everyone's asking the question, what's wrong with him? Because it seemed to be automatic, especially when you got to the playoffs. Like, this team was in the Grey Cup or the West Final almost every single year that he's been their leader. And, he's never had a season where he's got more interceptions than touchdowns, which is what he had this year. And, the one thing that was automatic for Bo was ball security. And it just doesn't seem to be there right now. And so I think it's a legitimate conversation because of the amount of money he makes, the CFL salary cap, and the fact that they do have another young guy pushing in Jake Maier. I think he's shown enough. And if I'm Dave Dickinson, I probably have confidence that if ownership or John Hufnagel said to me, we've got to lose that big salary, I'm pretty sure Dave Dickinson would say, okay, that's fine. I think I can work with what Maier's got. And I'm pretty confident that we can design an offense around him. So it's going to be an interesting offseason in that regard when it comes to Bo, because AJ's right. If he does hit the market, I don't think Ottawa is the only team looking. I think everybody's going to have a conversation about, can we find a way to bring in Bo Levi Mitchell? Because he's a guy that you put up on billboards and on the side of your stadium and market your team around. So it's going to be interesting. And I do think Trevor Harris is as good as gone, because you do have Vernon Adams, who we've talked about earlier. I think if he's healthy, he not only starts that game yesterday in Hamilton, but probably gives them a better chance to win than what Trevor Harris did. And it's interesting because Ottawa's the first place I thought of too, but I don't know if he goes back there. I know that they've had a change in management, but I think there's going to be bigger questions about Trevor Harris's overall future in the CFL and where he's at. And I don't know if it's a guarantee that he's, got a starting job. So, and the one forgotten man, I know it was only one game and God, it meant nothing, but, I do wonder, about Nathan Rourke in BC too. Does he shake loose? Does he find a new home? Certainly the two quarterbacks in Hamilton, there's going to be a lot of movement. And I think for the first time ever, you can't exclude the name Bo Levi Mitchell. I think he's right there in the conversation.
But AJ, you just talked about be your days in Edmonton, and I think with Bo Levi Mitchell, because to me, there's been diminished performance now for 2 straight seasons. It's not just one season, in my opinion. And the guy's getting up there in age, and you look at the big ticket. And the fact that, Dave Dickinson handpicked Jake Maier. I mean, if it was O'Connell that was supposed to be the starter when Bo Levi Mitchell went down, and he handpicked this guy that nobody knew about, and the guy can ball. The guy can clearly play. And I'm going to go back to the Edmonton days of Ricky Ray. Ricky Ray, his career was revitalized when he got dealt to Toronto in a move that no one ever thought. Everyone thought he'd stay there in Edmonton forever. Maybe it is a time for Bo Levi to try something different.
Well, and as we're sitting talking about this and thinking about the quarterback carousel, I wonder, depending on what happens with Toronto, let's say Toronto loses to Hamilton. Do they maybe make a push for him again? Because they made a push for him before, and Ryan Dinwiddie, of course, worked with them, right? So is that maybe a possibility? And then, because I could see that type of scenario where, maybe Bo goes to Toronto. I think McLeod Bethel-Thompson would be actually the perfect quarterback for Ottawa, because Ottawa's looking for a guy. They're not even really necessarily looking for a guy that has to be the starter in Ottawa. They're looking for a veteran guy that can be the starter and can also help the young guys along. They've got 2 guys that I think they think quite highly of, and Caleb Evans and Duck Hodges. And I think McLeod Bethel-Thompson with those 2 would be a pretty good situation for Ottawa. Then they don't have to play him anymore either, because they've never beat McLeod Bethel-Thompson. He's got an incredible record against them. So, maybe that's an area, because I could definitely see Bo going to Toronto with Dinwiddie and just, the conversations that he had last time he was a free agent, where, Toronto offered him, no pun intended, a boatload of money.
Yeah, and it was this close to happening. And it's funny because, man, that would be history repeating itself. The biggest name in terms of quarterback going back to a city like Toronto. And I don't think you can discredit it because I think the connection with Dinwiddie is legit. I think they're good pals. And let's not forget that he's got his fair share of other familiar names on that roster that he's played with before. Most notably, his favorite target in Eric Rogers. So I don't think it's certainly not crazy to think about. And Toronto would, I'm sure, be happy to switch out McLeod Bethel-Thompson for Bo Levi Mitchell. And I know McLeod Bethel-Thompson's played some good football there. He won the job and stole it from Arbuckle, but I think in a hurry, Dinwiddie would be happy to bring in his buddy Bo Levi Mitchell. And man, what a story that would be.
All right, guys. Last but not least, your East and West winners, please, who will be ending up in Hamilton for the Grey Cup, AJ.
Winnipeg, Hamilton. Winnipeg is, to me, a no-brainer. They're the best team in the Canadian Football League, and I'm not betting against them, even in the Grey Cup, assuming they get there. But I do feel if Winnipeg is going to lose, it will be in the Grey Cup against, maybe a host team that's a veteran team that is underachieved this year, in my opinion, in Hamilton. But I don't think it's happening this week. Not at home, not against Saskatchewan. I think Saskatchewan's going to play a lot better. But I still think Winnipeg's just going to dominate the line of scrimmage, and this is going to be a pretty one-sided affair. On the other side, closer game, but I like Hamilton. I like their defense, and I think we'll see if Masoli can come up big in a big game, and he's played quite well in some big games in the past. I think of that 2015 East Final where they lost to Ottawa on that burst to Ellingson miracle, and Masoli, he's got a lot to prove. And I feel like the other thing too is this is probably going to be, and maybe I'm dead wrong, maybe Argo fans are going to prove me wrong, but probably going to be at the very least 50-50, if not more Hamilton fans there at that game in Toronto. They're going to be fired up. I mean, you look at the crowd that they had in the snow, almost a sellout. Saskatchewan had like 10,000 empty seats, but Hamilton had like 3,000 empty seats. So in a Grey Cup year, I think Ticats are going to come in droves to Toronto and make it almost like a home atmosphere. And I like the Ticats to win.
Yeah, I'm the exact same. I'd love to have a different answer than AJ, but I think Winnipeg's, for me, even as he said earlier, a cut above. I think I've seen some very dominant teams being in the city I'm in, and it seemed automatic the Stampeders would be in the big game, and I think it's the same this year for Winnipeg. I think they're that good. Yeah, I think it's a conversation about, can they win the Grey Cup? I think that's going to be a bigger challenge against a group like either Toronto or Hamilton. But you look at that West semifinal, and I agree. I do think Saskatchewan's going to play better. I just don't think it's enough. I think Winnipeg's that much better. I'm not going to say they're going to run away with that game, but I'm not really sure it's going to come with a ton of challenges. I think they're both offensive and defensive line are that good. And the run game has been just dominant for Winnipeg. And if they can drain that clock and just not have the ball in the hands of Saskatchewan, well, then they don't stand much of a chance. And I think that'll be the game plan for Mike O'Shea and company. And then on the other side of it, yeah, I think Hamilton, the way that defense played on Sunday, I think it's pretty evident that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think they're going to put a ton of pressure on McLeod Bethel-Thompson. They're going to force him to throw it to beat them, much like they did with Trevor Harris. And I think that, this was a team that was picked at the start of the year to be in this Grey Cup for a number of different reasons. And yeah, it was a rocky season at times, but I think we're seeing right now why they were picked to be in this game. And I think it's going to happen. And being obviously just a few minutes down the road, I think there's going to be a ton of Ticats fans in attendance, which is going to help Hamilton. And Jeremiah Masoli is going to have to make one or two big throws, and I think he's capable of doing that. So I think Hamilton's going to find their way in the big game. And the one thing that I think is sometimes forgotten, yes, it's a cliche, but as we say, cliches are cliches because they're true. Can Toronto beat Hamilton for a fourth time this season? I don't know if that can happen. I really don't. And so I like Hamilton here. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think the Ticats are going to find a way to win it and play in the game in their home stadium on December 12th.
Well, there you have it, folks. I mean, there's the build-up to what should be an outstanding Final Four weekend in the Canadian Football League. The West, the East Final. Of course, here on the Ticats Audio Network, we have all kinds of build-up to it. Task and Twos, the Coach O Show with Coach Orlando Steinauer, Morielli, and Hitch, the old-timers, bringing back the old days and talking about what they expect to see. And, of course, on a daily basis, Louis B. with Ticats Today. Fantastic efforts. Guy AJ Jakubec from Ottawa, Will Nault from Calgary, still trying to get over that Stampeders loss, but still had lots to give us today here. So really appreciate you guys joining us here on the CFL This Week. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil, saying so long. We will see you next week. We'll be talking about the Grey Cup here on the Ticats Audio Network.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.